Hello and welcome back to Southern Songbird Farm. I am Carrie Shepperson, and today I thought we would do a little canning. I'm going to do something that scares a little bit of people. It is pressure canning, but there's no reason to be scared of it. When we did our lemon curd canning video, we did water bath canning, but today we're going to do some pressure canning. So we are going to can, because it is that time of year, spooky season, we may have some pumpkins. So until you've had a pumpkin pie made from fresh pumpkin or pumpkin that you've grown yourself or bought locally, you have not had a pumpkin pie. So I'm encouraging you to stock up on all those pumpkins when they go on sale. Can you some pumpkin and make pumpkin pie all year round. The first thing I will say about pumpkin or winter squash canning is that unfortunately we can't do a puree. So I know that's what a recipe calls for, but they have not had enough studies done on how much time and temperature it would take to can it safely at home. So what I do is we can pumpkin chunks, and then when we're ready to make our puree, we just drain them and smash them up and you're ready to go. So what we needed first, obviously, is our pressure canner. So this is one I bought years ago. It's a Presto pressure canner. I prefer the kind that has the weighted stem instead of the valve. You can get them that have a valve. I will say I learned in my canning class years ago that you should have those valves checked every year at your extension office. And I seriously doubt all of us do that. So I do like the weighted ones because I feel like it's just the simpler the better, and it's not a valve to worry about with numbers on it, and so I don't have to worry about it. The most important thing is that it comes with this little doohickey in here that keeps the cans up off the bottom of your canner. And of course you want it to have a good seal, so it's got a nice rubber ring. So every year when I get it out, I make sure to inspect it and that the ring is not cracked or dry or anything like that, because we're going to seal it up. And then even though our recipe is not in my Blue Book Guide to Preserving, which is like my Bible of canning, I do want to point out that it does have your pressure adjustments in it. So we'll adjust for altitude just like we do time-wise when you are water bath canning. So for my altitude, I'm at 0 to 1,000. So I'm gonna always can at a weight of 10 pounds. So if you need to adjust, or it also has your dial gauge measurement. So that's 11 on here. So if you are somebody who lives on top of a mountain, you wanna check your chart and make sure that you know where you're going. So I'm gonna set that aside for right now. We're gonna need a big pot to heat up our pumpkin chunks and heat up our liquid that's gonna go in our cans. Of course, we need cans. I like to do quart jars. Usually I can get about 2.5 cups of puree out of enough chunks that fit in a quart jar. You wanna use a ring. So I always save my rings, and then before I reuse them, I just make sure they're not too rusted or pitted and that they'll get a good seal. Once they get too rusted, you just gotta throw them away or do a cute craft with them. And then we want new canning lids, so they can only be used one time. So we're gonna use these once, and then they need to be thrown away, or just, sometimes I'll just mark them and use them as a lid. I know they're very hard to come by right now. Thank you, coronavirus, but get your hands on some new canning lids because that's what we wanna use on our jars. If you're new to canning and you buy new jars, they almost will always come with rings and lids on them, and those lids are perfectly fine to use. We're gonna need a ladle, a good sharp knife, a big old cutting board, a vegetable peeler, and a big wooden spoon or a plastic spoon. I try not to use metal too often with my canning jars because it can lead to little micro cracks that might explode in your canner. But you know what? My canning funnel is metal, so just be very careful. Just try not to ever scrape the sides of your jar with metal utensils. And then most importantly of all, today, instead of pumpkins, I'm gonna be canning Cushaws. So people who are from Appalachia will probably know what this is. It's just a great winter gourd, and I kind of like it better than pumpkin. And to be honest, it's our only pumpkin that was really prolific this year. So I'm gonna can it up. The other thing you can use canned pumpkin for is if your dog has a sick tummy, it's great to give them a little canned pumpkin, and you can't always get it year round at the store. So it's nice to have your own put by. So let's get started. Okay, a couple of things about pressure canning or pressure cooking in general. Always save your manual because it will literally tell you exactly step by step what to do. It talks about care and maintenance. And to be honest, it even suggests in here, and I will also suggest to you, if it's your first time and you're nervous, put about 4 cups of water in here and just go through the steps and make sure you're comfortable with it. No, like you won't have to get any food harmed. There will be no jars to worry about. You can just run through how to use your canner, which is a great way to learn. But there's a couple of things I want to point out. So it will take you through maintenance and just making sure you're good before you set up. So one thing they always make you do, and it seems a little ridiculous, but you're always supposed to look through your lid and make sure you can see all the way through this little stem, because that is where the pressure comes out as steam. So you want to make sure there's no food or particles or dirt in there that'll make it where the steam can't escape, because that's when you're going to have overpressure and something bad will happen. This is your little, this will pop up when your pressure is where it's supposed to be, and there's a sealed pressure inside the canner. So we want to make sure that that is there. This is another little pop-off valve, so just make sure everything is intact and where it's supposed to be on your lid. So my canner will hold 7 quart jars. It varies based on canner. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and put some hot water and get it going in here. And that way my jars are nice and hot and ready when I'm ready to put my hot pumpkin into them. So we'll go ahead and do that just like a water bath canner. You can keep your jars hot in there as well. Just make sure, the whole reason that we pressure can versus water bath can is when we're dealing with low acidity food, so that your green beans, pumpkin, potatoes, anything like that, there is not enough acidity in that food to keep it from spoiling without putting some major heat and pressure to it. So things like applesauce and tomatoes and jellies and jams and curd and things like that, we can get away with just doing in a water bath canner. But for things that are so low acid to begin with, we want to make sure we're pressure canning. We also want to make sure all of our utensils and tools are very clean, our hands are clean, because anything that we start with putting in this food, I wash the Cushaws really well. Whatever we start in there, we've got to be able to make sure that any bacteria or organisms are dead, and that they don't get in there and spoil our food or make our family sick. So that's what we're going to start with. And next I'm going to show you how to cut up a Cushaw. With a pumpkin or more of a gourd like this Cushaw, the facts are the same either way. If I'm doing a pumpkin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out the top just like I'm making a jack-o'-lantern, scrape out the seeds and the junk inside, and then just cut that pumpkin into 4 or 5 big chunks. So same thing with this Cushaw, except it doesn't have as much of a jack-o'-lantern type quality. So the first thing I'm going to do is remove the neck. Make sure you've got a really sharp knife. So I've already removed the neck from this other one. So I'm gonna set these aside for right now. I'm gonna do the exact same thing with the neck as I do with the bottom. Then once I get this bottom done, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it into just wedges or big chunks like so. Now you can see this does still have some of the guts like a pumpkin, but we can just take our trusty spoon and scrape all that out. So I'm gonna set that aside as well. And I've already got one here that I've scraped all the guts and junk out of. And then what I'm going to do is, these have a pretty thin rind, the Cushaws do. Pie pumpkins are kind of the same way. They usually have a pretty thin rind or peel on them. So you can usually get that off with a vegetable peeler. And as you can see, that is coming off pretty nicely with a peeler. Now, if you have a thicker rind pumpkin, then you're probably going to have to use a paring knife or another very sharp knife to take the outer portion of the skin off. So just be super careful. Don't get your fingers in there. And then once you have removed that rind or the outer skin, then I'm going to take my meat and I'm going to just roughly, don't stress, just roughly get it into about 1.5 inch chunks. Mostly I'm trying to get to kind of a uniform size of chunk so that they will cook pretty evenly when we get them in the jars. So I'm gonna cut all these bad boys up and we will be putting it in the hot water, heating up our pumpkin, and we'll be ready to can. Okay, so as you can see, it is a little bit later because it is dark outside. I got all my Cushaw cut up, I covered it up, ran outside, moved the broiler chickens. You can see some videos about that. I'll put a link to them up on top. But we had to move the broiler chickens, and now we came in, had dinner, and we're back to Cushaw canning. So The next step of the pumpkin or Cushaw pressure canning process is we don't want to put cold food into hot jars because it's not going to be as nice of a pack. So we boiled the Cushaw for 2 minutes, or the pumpkin, or whatever winter gourd you're doing. And the object is not to cook it, but we just want to get it nice and hot so that it goes into the jar evenly. And so all that heat and pressure can just force its way in and get a good seal on your jar. So right now what I'm going to do is use my jar lifter. So you need to have a jar lifter. In my 3 quarts that I put in this canner, I did put a little bit in these jars just to weight them down because I wanted to keep my jars nice and hot while I was boiling my Cushaw. So I'm going to get just a couple at a time. Be very careful. That is hot boiling water, so just be real gentle with yourself. Okay, so I'm just going to get a couple at a time. And what we're going to do is, for a lot of your non-acidic foods and vegetables, meats, and things like that, we're going to do a 1-inch headspace. So if you get some of our little starter canning kits will come with this little guy. He's really good. Mine is broken at the top. But you can use it to get out air bubbles, or you can use the stick of a silicone spoon. But the other great thing about it is it has all of your headspace right here. So this is 1/4 of an inch, this is 1/2, 3/4 an inch. But if you don't have one of these fancy tools, it is okay, because if you can see, when I put my inch in here, an inch headspace is just where the jar starts to come up to the lid. So that's a great way to kind of judge what 1 inch is. So don't stress if you don't have a fancy tool. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start loading the hot Cushaw into the jars. I'm not going to press down too much, because what I don't want to happen is, remember we talked about how it's really not safe to puree pumpkin for canning. So I don't want to get it to where it's just smooshed down into a puree, which is again why we're not cooking the pumpkin. We're just getting it nice and hot throughout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put several pieces down in here. Oh, those little guys didn't want to go in. So what I'm going to do is just kind of gently just move them around with the back of my spoon here, bottom of my spoon. I can get obviously a couple more pieces in there. So I'm going to put just a couple more pieces in here. It's kind of like a little bit of a puzzle. You just kind of see how many you can fit. But what I definitely want to do is not get to where I'm getting up in that 1 inch headspace. So that looks probably about right. I think I can get one more little piece behind there, right in there. And then I'm going to take this, it's just hot water, the hot liquid that I boiled the Cushaw in, and I'm going to fill it up to maintain that 1 inch headspace. This is why you should wear shoes while you're canning. There's hot water and hot food going everywhere. And then I'm going to take my, either that spatula or this stick. Again, I'm not using metal because I don't want to scratch the jars inside. And then I'm just making sure I'm pushing any air bubbles that are trapped in between those pieces, I'm pushing them out. And then I'm just going to kind of tap them right down where I want them. Looks like I can use, now that I got those air bubbles out, I need just a couple more drops. That's perfect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a lid. So back in the olden days, not really that old, okay, because when I started canning, they told us to do this. But I don't know, definitely check your manufacturer on your lids. But now Ball says that you don't have to heat your lids. You do wash them and dry them and you set them aside till it's ready to use. But it used to be that we kind of simmered them in some water on the stove till they were ready to use, but you don't have to do that anymore. So you can take a nice clean lid and put it right on. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just gently wipe the rim of this jar, because you don't want to get any food caught in the rim because it's going to mess up your seal. So you can use a clean rag or a wet rag and do that. And then I'm going to put my lid on, get my ring, and then I'm just, now this is very hot, so if you need to use a mitten, you can. And then I'm just going to get it finger tight. I'm not cranking down on that lid. I'm just getting it finger tight. And then when I get all my jars loaded, they're going to go back in the pressure canner, and I'll show you where we go from there. Okay, so I've loaded all my jars. I didn't quite enough to do a full load of 7, so I'll do those in the next batch. So I fit 6 jars in the canner. So Doug, if you want to come a little bit closer. As you can see, the canner, my canner calls for 3 quarts of water. So unlike a water bath canner, the water is not going to come up and cover your jars. Okay, because this is not boiling the jars like a water bath canner. It's going to create pressure and pressurize the cans. So that's a little bit different. Don't expect the water to come up over your cans. Also, I try to kind of evenly space those 6 jars, so that's good. And then it's time to put our lid on. So I'm going to, mine has a little arrow that you follow to put it on. So you just put it on and then it seals like this. So I'm gonna make sure that my heat is about on high. I'm gonna wait for this to pressurize. When I get a steady stream out of this little valve here, then I'm going to turn my heat down slightly and let that vent for 10 minutes. This little stopper right here is gonna pop up. It's gonna let me know I've attained pressure, and then it'll be time to put our weighted gauge on so that we can start our canning time. So when we come back, I'll show you the steam and then we will put our weight on. Okay, so I don't know if you can see in the camera, maybe if I hold my arm in front of it. Can you see that on the camera, Doug? Okay, so we have a nice steady stream of pressure. This little valve is up. So now I'm ready to put my weight on. So for my altitude, like we said, I want 10 pounds of pressure. So, and this is 5, 1 ring is 10, and 2 rings is 15. So I always use 1 ring, and I'm gonna set it right on there like that. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna go ahead and put this back up to high. I have it on about like 8, I feel like. I'm gonna wait for that to rock. And when it starts getting to a nice steady rock, I'm gonna adjust my temperature until I get to a nice steady rocking. And then I'll be ready to start my timer. So quarts are 90 minutes, pints are 55 minutes. So we will see you in an hour and a half. Done. As you can see, this little guy is up. This has been rocking gently. I've been at about a medium-high level on my electric stove. Those of you with gas, I'm so jealous because you would be so much easier to control the temperature, but we make it work. So now what I'm going to do, because our time is up, is this is cool. Earlier. So what I'm going to do is, don't ever slide this across your gas or your glass stove top to get some scratch. And it's very heavy, so very carefully slide it over off of the heat. So what we're going to do now is, you can't just like take that off and let all the steam out. This will rock slower and slower and slower. As it cools, the pressure in here is going to decrease, and eventually that little guy is going to go down. And at that point, once that has gone down, then I know the pressure is less enough for me to be able to take that off and take the little weight off. So that's what we're going to wait on. It just depends how long it takes. It can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, sometimes longer if I've been canning a long time during the day, and so everything is very hot. But what you don't want to do is like pour cold water over it or take it to your sink and force it to lose pressure quicker, because you're asking to check your jars and for other issues. So we're almost done, I promise. Once this cools off, we'll open it up and get the cans out. Okay, so thankfully that only took about 20 minutes to cool off, which is awesome, because if it's a little bit earlier in the day, you've got time for another batch. So come a little closer, Doug, and we'll take this off. So as you can see, this little metal guy is down, which is awesome. That means it's safe to take my weight off. So sometimes you'll get another little escape of steam, but we didn't there, and that's totally fine. And then what we're gonna do is, we know now it's safe to take our lid off because the pressure is decreased. So I'm gonna take it off. Always, always, always take lids off away from your face so that the steam and the hot water doesn't hit you. So I'm just gonna set that aside. And then sometimes I'll actually leave them in the canner to cool, but I'm gonna take one out so you can see this. So Doug, if you'll come a little bit closer for me. So this is gonna bubble for a long time. That's totally normal. There's an immense amount of heat and pressure in this jar. So I will make sure that when I post this video, I put a picture at the end of what the jars look like after. They'll be, I can tell right now there's gonna be just a little bit of moisture loss, water loss, and that is very, very, very common with pressure canning, and it's totally fine. So the way that goes is if the food is not covered, it is still completely safe to eat as long as your jar is sealed. So we'll be waiting to hear these jars pop and seal down. But as long as the jar is sealed, it's completely safe to eat. The worst that can happen is if there's any food above the liquid line, it might discolor a little bit, but it's not going to affect the safety of the food. So there's plenty of times where I've opened a jar of potatoes or something like that that's had quite a bit of liquid loss, and if the top couple are just a little bit grayish, I'll just discard them. It's not a big deal. So, oh, there was a little pop. So these are starting to seal, which is awesome. And I'm just gonna keep unloading these guys. I think they say that most canned items are good for about a year on the shelf. But honestly, we are eating green beans still from 2016. So they're always safe to eat as long as they've been sealed properly and they're good. It's just the quality will go down. So it's kind of like one of those things with the grocery store where it says Best Buy versus expired. It's really just Best Buy a year. After that, you do start losing quality. But like I said, we still eat a lot of green beans from a long time ago. So, you know, I encourage everybody to give it a try. Pressure canning is not scary. I hope that you'll give it a shot. We've got some applesauce to do this week, so I'll be videoing that. And that'll be with the water bath canner again. So if you missed the lemon curd video, you can check the applesauce video out, trying to do some fall things. And give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook. We post a lot of stuff all through the week on that. And you can kind of see what other kind of stuff we do. And we appreciate you watching. Thanks so much.